Hey friends, Ed McDonough here, and welcome to Live Stream Wednesday, coming to you from Walpole, Massachusetts, and streaming live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and on livestreamwednesday.com. And today, I'm really excited to have on my show commercial photographer Josh Edenbaum. Now, Josh is a full-service commercial photography studio, and one of the things I love about what he does is he prides himself on building a long-term relationship with his clients and helping them and their products look the very best they can. And not only is he a commercial photographer, but he's also an amazing fine art photographer. So Josh, welcome to the show. So glad to have you here today. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on today.
Oh, it's awesome to have you here. So listen, let's kick this off and tell us a little bit about how photography became your passion and how long you've been doing it.
Well, I think I probably started when I was a kid traveling with my parents. My father always loved art and he always had a camera. So I started shooting when we were traveling and I was using, original film cameras, medium format cameras, single lens, 35 millimeter cameras, where you actually had to look through the camera and the image was backwards because there was no mirror in those days. It was all basically just going through the lenses. So that kind of started my whole feeling with photography and getting into it. And then as time went on and I was in like junior high school, I was the typical yearbook photographer. I was the one that was photographing all the events, photographing the sports, of course, photographing the cheerleaders, and just having fun doing that. And I fell in love with it and it just continued on. And now, 2022, I'll be celebrating 30 years in business.
Wow, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you mentioned, film. I know there's a whole generation that never even know that when you took a picture, you actually had to take something out of your camera and go and develop that into a piece of film and then make that into a print. So, now there's all this digital technology. How has that changed your life, changed your business?
It's made a huge difference in the business. I mean, when I started doing like commercial photography, we would work in studios. We would do catalogs for jewelry companies, anything that was manufactured that we had a brochure, you had to do photography. And the whole process of it was so much longer. You had to put a Polaroid in the camera. You would take the Polaroid, you would wait the 60 seconds, you'd look at the Polaroid, you'd make any adjustments on the product, and then you'd put the film in, and you'd have to wait 3 hours to get the film back. And if it was a big elaborate set, you couldn't break that down and continue on to the next shot because you had to make sure the film would be perfect. Nowadays, my camera's plugged into a computer. I hit the shutter, the image pops right up on the screen. And then if I'm working with an art director or a creative director for a company, they actually take that image and place it in the ad or in the brochure or in the catalog. Years ago, we'd photocopy the Polaroid and put it in a fax machine. And even before fax machine, we'd get in the car and we'd drive over to them to show them to make sure it would fit in different layouts. It streamlined it incredibly. But there was also a point where people weren't ready to trust digital. And I was working with a friend of mine and we shared space together. And we decided we both had catalogs coming in and we showed our client the difference between digital and film. Mm-hmm. And digital won out. And we made the investment and I haven't looked back since.
Yeah, awesome. And so Josh, there may be somebody on this live stream that doesn't even know what a Polaroid is. So a Polaroid was a way to take a picture and the image would pop out into your hands and you'd watch it develop. It would take about 60 seconds or something, right?
Exactly. And we had a film at one point, it was a Polaroid, it was positive negative. So you actually would pull it apart.
That's right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
You had a negative.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Negative, and you could make a photograph from that.
Right.
And just the cost of the Polaroids, of the film, of the processing, you can't compare to what it is now when you have those files that you can look at and just give those directly to your client.
So you're an expert. I probably couldn't tell, but if somebody took a picture of something, a quality picture, well lit of an object, and one was film and one was digital, and you were looking at them both, can you tell the difference?
sometimes you really can't even tell anymore. I mean,
Yeah.
you can apply different filters through Photoshop to mimic like the emulsion of the film. I mean, photographers, Kodachrome was the standard. If you wanted amazing color, amazing detail, you shot Kodachrome. And there are actually filters now that you can actually put that in, so it will look like a Kodachrome. It'll give you that color. It'll give you that little bit of grain. Or now, now it's called noise. Compared to, it was the grain of the emulsion that was in the film.
Yeah, so now you're adding that back in to make it look like
exactly
film, right? Yeah.
I mean, depending on, especially with like my fine art stuff, I want a certain amount of grain in there. I want something to give that realistic feeling.
Yeah, cool. So, I actually know Josh. We're in a networking group together, and he came to me a while ago and said, "Hey, I want to do a case study on this," and I gave him some pointers on it. And one of the things that I learned was so this was just a really simple case study. It was for a manufacturing company, and one of the products they made was screws. And Josh sent me two pictures, and one was a picture that someone took with their iPhone. They took a picture, and then the other picture was the picture that Josh took in his studio, well lit. And I mean, it's a screw, but the difference in those pictures, to me, a novice, was amazing. So Josh, can you talk a little bit about, why a commercial photographer is so important to make your product stand out, kind of leap out on the page?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the commercial photographer has the experience to photograph a product. I mean, you can look at it any realm with lawyers. You're not going to hire a friend who reads a couple of law books versus a lawyer that has a law degree. I mean, I was trained as a commercial photographer. I started shooting film. I went on to digital, and there are certain ways to light certain products. And you see it all the time. People will photograph jewelry that have an Etsy site or something like that, and they try to sell. Jewelry is very hard to photograph. Even a screw is hard to photograph because it has reflections. It sees all around the screw. So it's going to see the lights. It's going to see the reflectors. It's going to possibly even see you if it's a shiny piece of metal. There was a lot to learn when I was first doing commercial photography and how I learned how to photograph products. Working for I used to do a lot of work for Balfour. We used to photograph all the class rings. I mean, if you didn't know how to photograph a ring or a piece of jewelry with that shiny metal, you're going to see all this different stuff. And again, when I first started, it was film. You didn't have Photoshop to retouch it. If you wanted to clean that product up afterwards, it would cost you $350 an hour for someone to sit in front of what's called a Cytex machine and retouch that piece of film to make it into something. Nowadays, you can clean it up, but I was trained to shoot it so there's minimal retouching. I'm going to see the clearest possible image on a screw, on a piece of jewelry, on medical equipment, anything that I photograph. I use that years of training in the past in applying it to what I'm doing now.
And so is a lot of that have to do with the lighting and the setting that it's in, or is it the equipment? Is it the camera and the lens? Or it's probably a combination of everything, but
it's a combination.
I'll let you answer.
Yeah. But it's more so the lighting. It's more so what type of lighting tools that you're using. We use things that are called soft boxes. We use reflectors. We have reflectors that are white, silver, gold, black, depending upon what you're trying to do. And there's lighting ratios. There are ways to get a little bit more contrast out of a product by using a different ratio versus just putting 3 lights in all together at the exact same, luminosity or power.
Right.
One a little bit stronger than the other, that may create a little bit more contrast. It may also show a little bit more curve of something. If you're looking at something that's metal and it has an arc to it, when you're lighting it a different way, you're going to actually see that curve versus making it look a little bit more flat.
Got it.
It comes down to experience pretty much.
And so that to me sounds like that's kind of like a major reason why someone should bring you in, right? Is because you have that experience, 20 something years of experience of photographing those products in those types of situations. Yeah.
It's, I mean, if someone asks, I'm not a wedding photographer. If people ask me to do a wedding, I'll do it as a favor for a friend, but that's not my forte. Let the wedding photographers do it. It's the same thing. I know a couple of people that are wedding photographers. Oh, someone asked me to photograph their jewelry. Okay. Well, you photograph them on their hands for the wedding and maybe in front of the card, but the photographer for a catalog, that's totally different. So yeah, it's more about using the correct photographer for that. It's the same thing. I don't do baby pictures. I don't do infants. There's amazing photographers that do that type of work. That's not my forte. Let them do that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I hear you.
Definitely.
So, so what's your favorite thing to photograph? You have a favorite?
For my commercial work, I love to photograph architecture because it's interesting. Because you're taking something that's three-dimensional and you're turning it into something a little bit more two-dimensional, which is really always interesting to me. And in all fairness, I love photographing products. I photograph dish towels and aprons and things like that. But to make them look good and make them look like they're in an actual room or a setting where we're using props and in different floors and different backgrounds, that's very interesting to me. And that's fun and it's creative.
Yeah, that's cool. So, give me a tip for the novice out here. So, someone who wants to, or maybe even wants to break into the business. Someone who wants to photograph something and they really want it to look the best they possibly can. What's a tip or two that you can give us? As far as a novice, just in general, shoot as much as you possibly can. Constantly shoot, and that will basically take your craft to the next level. And as far as shooting a product, look online. There's so many different photographers these days that showcase a lot of their work. They have live stream things very similar to this, where they're showing how it's done, they're showing technique, and you can really learn from watching them do work. That's how I learned a lot of my work. I worked with some amazing photographers when I first started in this business, especially when I was in college. I worked with a guy by the name of Dave Gilstein, who used to run a photography studio for a company called Blazing Graphics, which goes back years in the whole advertising industry. I learned so much from him about how to photograph a product, how to light a product, that I still use a lot of those techniques today that I learned then. So it's a matter of watching other people work and learning from them. Yeah, so that education component, right?
Yes.
Really, yeah, cool, cool. So I want to switch gears here a little bit because you are also a fine art photographer, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I've seen some of your shots, the ones you just had on, you were posted on LinkedIn, were just amazing. Talk to us about that. Like, what's the passion behind that, and how can people, take advantage of your work too?
If I could make a living selling my fine art photography, I would do that hands down. At a very young age, again, my father was my influence in photography, showed me art, and I looked at photographers. I looked at Ansel Adams. I looked at Edward Weston. Ansel Adams had an assistant called John by the name of John Sexton. He printed all his work. I took photography workshops with a gentleman by the name of Stephen Wilkes, who does amazing work for National Geographic. Another photographer by the name of Michael Kenna, all black and white. That was all influenced in my work. I love fine art photography. I love taking the most ordinary thing, like a seascape or an oceanscape or something in a city, and turning it into something different, making it look a little bit different than it actually does. How you can see my work. I recently actually launched a fine art website. It's joshedenbaum.art. It's a Shopify thing where people can go there and they buy prints, all different sizes, canvas prints, metal prints, things like that. And it's been really fun getting my work out there. And I enter a couple of contests here and there through different galleries and things like that. And it's nice to have your work displayed. I was recently selected with the Wickford Art Association. They're doing a thing called Food Works, and they have about 14 photographers. And we each, last night actually on a Zoom call, we each picked 2 different food organizations in the state of Rhode Island that are working with us, and we're going to photograph for them. They'll be able to use the images. We're going to be able to show the images at the Wickford Art Association, I think sometime in June. And there's going to be an outdoor farmers market with all these companies.
Oh, wow. That sounds cool.
It's going to be really fun. And there's some amazing photographers in the group. Good friend of mine, Al Weems, that I've known for years, that he's in there. Another guy, Paul Murray, the Jaffes, the husband and wife, they're in there as well. A whole bunch of different photographers. And it's, we're all going to interpret these businesses with our own vision. And that's the thing about photography. It's creative. It's, what, personally, I couldn't sit behind a desk with a tie on all day long. It's not me. It's not my DNA. My father was a chemical engineer. My brother was a chemical engineer. They did it. Fine with them. It's not who I am. I need that creativity. And that's what drives me. So, a lot of the stuff that I'm showing you right now that I was on LinkedIn and I'm doing on my Facebook page, as well as Instagram, is my passion. It's that fine art photography. And I'm very fortunate, very grateful that I live in a beautiful area in Narragansett, and I've got the ocean along with. And, there's not a day where I say, okay, you know what, the light's just right, everything's perfect, I'm going to go out and I'm going to shoot for a couple of hours. And it keeps me going.
I can tell you're passionate about it too.
Yeah, definitely.
Josh is also a surfer too. So just for point that out as well. So Josh, just give me that website for your fine art one more time. I know I've been putting up your regular website.
It's www.joshedenbaum.art.
Awesome. And they can get to it from here too, right?
Yeah. So if you go to my regular website, my commercial site, that's joshedenbaum.com. There's a link on there for the fine art photography store, and that will take you right to it.
Cool.
And it's updated constantly. I put up, I think, another 15, 20 images yesterday for some recent stuff that I've been shooting. Nice.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, so what's in store for the future for you? What's coming up?
What's coming up for me, I've got a couple of different projects I'm working on. I'm working on a catalog for a client of mine, more dish towels and aprons and things like that. I've got some executive portraits coming up. I'm doing some stuff. I do some work for a couple of different website companies, friends of mine that design websites and things like that. So they kind of pull me in to do headshots and things like that. I'm continuing on my fine art work. I've had this passion that just, I don't know, maybe just really kicked in this year more so than anything, just to get out there and shoot a lot more. So I'm really trying to push that work a lot. And depending when, the pandemic gets to a little bit more of a norm, or we can get somewhat back to normal, it's back to traveling and shooting.
Yeah.
I've got a few places I got to get to. I got to get to Zion. I got to get out to Bryce. I'd love to get over to Europe when I get a chance to shoot, just to interpret my vision with those places.
Yeah.
So, and then, you got to get in the water and surf every once in a while too. So that's pretty much my future.
You always have to have time for surfing.
Yeah. I got out this morning a little while, just to have a little bit of fun, just to get out and kind of clear my head and get a good day going.
Yeah. Awesome. So, what about equipment? So, I know that, you probably have top of the line stuff, but what should the novice look at for in terms of, the type of camera? Let's say they're interested in doing exactly what you want to do, where they're photographing objects more so than like a wedding and people and stuff like that.
I mean, nowadays there's so many different cameras that are out there. Now the whole thing is these mirrorless cameras. I personally like a regular DSLR where you can look through the lens and look through a viewfinder. Any of the Nikons, any of the Canons, there's, consumer version of cameras where you can get a camera and a couple of lenses for $500, which is fairly reasonable these days. And then if you want to learn how to photograph products, buy one of those little light boxes that Amazon sells. It's a little bit of a tent, and you put lights on and around it, and you can photograph jewelry, you can photograph small products and things like that. That's a good way to start. And then eventually, once you get beyond there, you get away from the tent and you learn how to build your own tent, so to speak, with using different lights and using different ratios and things like that. But it's a great way to start. And there's a lot of small businesses that photograph their products themselves, and even with their iPhone in one of those little tents. And it suffices for what they need it for on a website or things like that. The big difference for me too is I still do a lot of work that actually gets printed in a catalog. That's what I do. I'm a commercial photographer. So my files have to be gigantic. They have to be crystal clear, and they have to actually be correct for the color. And that's a whole technical thing involved, where, you photograph, you look on your monitor, oh, it's beautiful. Then you send it to the printer and you get it back and it's like green.
Yeah, yeah.
What I do wrong? Well, that's what you sent us. You have to know things.
Yeah.
And that comes in time. You just learn that stuff as time goes on.
So you actually have to tweak the picture so that when it gets printed, the colors come out correctly.
Yeah, I mean, anything we see on a computer screen is what's called RGB, red, green, and blue.
Right.
And lay down ink on a page, it's CMYK, it's cyan, it's magenta, it's yellow, and it's black. And there are percentages of all those 4 inks that make a color on a printed page. And it's all done by numbers. And there's a certain way to tweak that file and get it right so it reproduces correctly. And there are times where I'm shooting stuff and my client's like, oh, where it was a little bit dark, I had to do this to it, I had to take a little bit of color out of it. And that's, it's a learning process because every printer is going to be different.
Right.
And you kind of have to know all those things. And it's a long process to get them perfect. And there are people that do that. That's their expertise. They do color. I mean, I have a guy that I use in Warwick sometimes who he knows his color. He started in the business making color separations. He knows that stuff, so he can look at a file and tweak it and get it just right.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So Josh, I just want to thank you again for being on today. Before we go, I'm going to put up your website again. Is this the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yep. Yeah, my website there. It's got my phone contact information. It's got my email as well.
Give us your number real quick.
401-641-8983.
Awesome. Great. So hang out here for a sec. I want to talk to you afterwards. I'm just going to say goodbye to the folks, but thank you so much for being on today and enlightening us and telling us everything we need to know about photographing stuff in the. Here I am. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. It's been great to have you here. Next time on the show, we're going to have Daya Otley. He's a voice actor and communication coach expert, and you don't want to miss this. His voice is unbelievable. You're just gonna love hearing his voice so much. But before I go, I got one more thing for you. Would you like to be interviewed on Livestream Wednesday? Visit livestreamwednesday.com. Click the green Leave a Voicemail Here button and record and leave me a voice message, and someone from my team will get back to you within 2 business days. So thanks, everybody. Thanks for being here today, and we'll see you next time on Live Stream Wednesday.